Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. Hope everybody's having a delicious lunch. My name is Chloe Halpenny, as was shared. My pronouns are she, her, and I am very, very grateful and honored and privileged to be here as a member of the board of directors of CAEH. I joined the board a couple of years ago, and it's been an incredible experience. I think that I was chosen in part for my youthful, fun vibes. I bring the average age of the board down a little bit, and I'm kind of funny sometimes too. So it's mainly what I contribute, but when I'm not making really bad jokes in front of 1,700 people, I have the pleasure of being a PhD student and teach at Queen's University and work in social policy research and evaluation, mostly around poverty and income security and income supports, which we all know are very, very closely connected to homelessness, and all of these things, poverty and homelessness and hunger, are policy choices which people in power are making every day. And that is why I feel so compelled to do this work and to have the privilege of serving with CAEH and really working with and supporting people who are working to change those decisions. So thank you so much for having me, and I'm very excited to be your MC for our lunchtime session today. So first up, I want to welcome Tim Aubrey and Jeff Nelson to the stage to talk about and present the annual Paula Goring Memorial Scholarship. Please welcome them to the stage.
To pull a microphone up for us. Okay. Good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction. Tim and I are honored to be given the opportunity again this year to announce the winners of the Paula Goring Memorial Scholarship. For my part, I just have to say this is my favorite part of the conference, where we get to announce these winners, because we are not only recognizing the winners, we're recognizing the contributions of our colleague Paula Goring, the late Paula Goring, and furthering her legacy, which is substantial. Before I get into the award, I just want to check to see if one of the award winners is here, and that's Matt Larson. Matt, are you? There he is. Okay, all right, so we're good. Okay. First, let me tell you briefly about the scholarship program. It was started in Winnipeg in 2017, and scholarships since then have been awarded every year at this conference in recognition of the significant contributions over a 30-year period of Dr. Paula Goring, conducting research, developing programs and policies to end homelessness in Canada. And we are very grateful to Tim Richter and the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness for having this award, for implementing this award for new scholars, new practitioners, and for Paula. So Paula worked at the Center for Addiction and Mental Health throughout her career and led numerous provincial and national projects on community mental health. From 2008 to 2013, she served as the lead investigator for the at-home Chez Soi project that was done by the Mental Health Commission of Canada. It's the largest study of housing first conducted in the world. And Tim and I were fortunate to be able to be a part of the research team for that particular investigation. Do we also have some slides? We have a picture of Paula. I want to have Paula up there looking at us. As a result of her exceptional leadership on this action research project, Housing First was scaled up in communities across Canada. Sadly, Paula left us, passing away all too soon in May of 2016. Paula, to us, the two of us, and many others, she was a leader, she was a colleague, and she was a friend. In recognition of Paula's role as mentor to innumerable students and pioneering researchers, was a master at translating research knowledge into practice. The Canadian Alliance established this award to support students and Housing First service providers at this annual meeting. For this conference, we received excellent application for both the service provider and the student researcher award. It was not an easy task to select the winners for that. But I'm going to announce the winners for the Student Researcher Award, and I want to thank two people on the review committee who selected the winners. And one is Dr. Kathleen Wharton of Canada Mortgage and Housing, who's with us today and sitting over here somewhere. Kathleen, there's so much light I can't even see you anymore. And Gino DeStasio, who was here earlier and had to head back to Winnipeg from the University of Winnipeg. So, thank you very much for that help. The two student award winners. So I'll introduce the first one, and we'll flip to the next slide. There we are. And the first winner is Ada Agha. And Ada obtained a Master of Science in Public Health from the University of Toronto. She's currently a PhD student in Community Psychology at the University of Ottawa. She has been supported with a SSHRC Doctoral Fellowship, and she has published already 15 articles in peer-reviewed journals on homelessness and housing first. That's just incredible. Those publications include research on the fidelity of Housing First programs in Europe and North America, an examination of factors related to people who are less successful with Housing First programs, and recent research published on chronic homelessness in Canada. For her work, she's also for her work on the Ottawa CMHA condominium program. She was a member of the research team that was awarded the Paul Gehring Memorial Research Translation Award. That's from the Center of Addiction and Mental Health. So you're cleaning up. You get both Paul Gehring Awards. For her doctoral research, Ada is examining the relationship between social capital and homelessness using both quantitative and qualitative methods. More specifically, she is examining how positive relationships with family, friends, and support workers and sense of belonging in one's neighborhood influence social capital and trust, and how that social capital is related to homelessness. The support letter for her nomination from her advisor states, Ms. Agha's academic record, extensive involvement in research on homelessness and housing first, relevant to community mental health services, and outstanding productivity relative to her stage of training make her a most worthy candidate for the Paula Gehring Award. Please give a round of applause to Ada Agha. Thank you. Ada. We want her to stay up here? Okay, all right. The second award winner for student research is Matt Larson. Matt is a graduate student in the MSc program in Community Health Sciences at the University of Calgary. He has 3 publications, including 2 in the Canadian Medical Association Journal, one of which is a first authored paper. Matt's research focuses on how persons with homelessness, experiencing homelessness, manage diabetes. And he uses a participatory action research approach in this work that's designed to use research findings to influence policy and practice. In a SSHRC-funded study, Matt is using a phenomenological approach to examine stigma and shame among persons with diabetes who are experiencing homelessness. He's using shame resilience theory as the framework to guide the interpretation of the findings on stigma and coping. Matt's nomination letter from his advisor states the following. I met Matt when he was experiencing homelessness and struggling with addiction and mental health issues. However, over the past 4 years, the transformation in Matt has been truly remarkable. He's bright, intelligent, driven, passionate about improving the circumstances of those who've been where he's been. His firsthand experience provides him with empathy, compassion, and interpersonal skills which will enable him to be an outstanding asset to the university and to the community at large. He's an extraordinary communicator, both verbally and in written communication, which will enable him to successfully translate his research findings in meaningful ways. I foresee that Matt will continue to make meaningful contributions to community mental health programming well beyond his master's degree. Please give a big round of applause. There you go. All right. And now?
All right, good. Thanks, Jeff. Just echo that the presentation of these awards, along with the session in which the winners present, which will happen after lunch, they're also two of the favorite parts of the conference for me, for the reasons Jeff cited. It also seems that every year the award winners get younger and I become older. How does that work? In any event, we again had excellent nominations for the Paula Goring Memorial Scholarship for Service Providers. There's so much good work going on across the country, and I see it in these nominations, and it's always hard to pick a winner. A great team of evaluators who carefully reviewed the nominations. I want to thank Greg Bishop from the St. John Human Development Council. That's good. Greg has a fan club here. I like that. Pio Girolico from CMHA Toronto, and Jason Medford from Coda Health for their generous assistance with the evaluation process. The Service Provider Award winner this year is Madison Salmon, who's a housing-based case manager in the Housing First program at Options Bytown in Ottawa. The program at Options is quite innovative regarding its integration of peer support into its services and its focus on the community participation of clients. There's also significant effort among staff in increasing the computer literacy of clients. In the nomination letter, Madison's contribution to the implementation of these innovations is highlighted. She's described as a kind and caring and client-centered housing-based case manager. She ensures that not only she is housing individuals in their preferred locations and types of apartment, but she goes above by helping her clients to personalize their apartments to create a home. She's also adept at helping her clients get connected with other supports in their community to help them feel settled and welcomed. Madison, could you come up here? So our award winner, Madison Salmon. So, as I mentioned, there'll be presentations of the work of our award winners, Ida, Matt, and Madison. It'll happen after lunch in room 603. I also want to thank CAEH for these annual scholarships. And then last, a shameless plug for Jeff and I. If you're interested in hearing more about Housing First, I encourage you to attend a session on the Canadian Housing First Network, Community of Interest, which will happen this afternoon at 3:30 in 608, 609. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Tim, Jeff, Ada, Matt, and Madison, and congratulations to all of the scholarship winners. CAEH and every national conference on ending homelessness would absolutely not be possible without the support of our sponsors. As you can imagine, putting on a conference of this size and scale is a massive endeavor, and we couldn't bring everyone together here in Chibuktuk without the support of our sponsors. The Home Depot Canada Foundation is the presenting sponsor of CAEH23 and have been a key sponsor of the conference for many years. Without them, this event would not be possible. With that, I'd like to welcome Gail Bradley, who is the Manager of Community Investment from the Home Depot Canada Foundation, to the stage to introduce our next keynote speaker.
I was fighting losing battles with opponents disguised as friends, and coming home to a different fight that never ends. I saw no other choice. I had to leave a roof for the rain. But sometimes I wonder if there was a path with more to gain. Maybe the opportunities would have been better, and every day would take me further towards something greater.
To help create new paths for youth experiencing homelessness, the Home Depot Canada Foundation is committing $125 million by 2030.
Good afternoon. I'm Gail Bradley, and I'm so pleased to be here representing the Home Depot Canada Foundation. We're honored to be a supporter of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness and presenting sponsor at this conference. What an amazing opportunity to listen, learn, and collaborate with such a diverse network. 10 years ago, on the eve of this very conference in Ottawa, the Home Depot Canada Foundation made a 3-year, $10 million commitment to help prevent and end youth homelessness in Canada. $10 million became 20, and 20 became 50. And at the end of 2021, we surpassed our $50 million goal and have now pledged $125 million by 2030. And I am proud to say that we are halfway there with close to $70 million invested in this cause. And we're not done. We know that there's more work to do. Everyone at the Home Depot Canada and our foundation remains committed to removing systemic barriers youth face to foster healthy pathways for change. It is together with the support of the Home Depot Canada associates, suppliers, and customers that the Home Depot Canada Foundation works to create new paths for youth by focusing on our 3 strategic priorities: improving housing stability for underserved youth, increasing youth employment readiness, and investing in wraparound supports for youth. We are grateful for the amazing support and partnerships from so many of you in this room. Thank you. It has been informative, humbling, and inspiring to work alongside all of you. My colleagues Neil and Denise are here as well, and it is our hopes that you'll stop by our booth at the exhibition hall to say hello and learn more about our granting programs and partnerships. Now let's get to our keynote speaker. It's a pleasure for me to have this opportunity to introduce such an inspirational and accomplished person. Jeff Olivet is the Executive Director of the U.S. Interagency Council on Homelessness. He has worked to prevent and end homelessness for more than 25 years as a street outreach worker, case manager, coalition builder, researcher, and trainer. He is the founder of Joe Consulting, co-founder of Racial Equity Partners, and from 2010 to 2018, he served as CEO of C4 Innovations. Throughout his career, he has worked extensively in the area of homelessness and housing, health and behavioral health, HIV, education, and organizational development. Jeff has been principal investigator on multiple research studies funded by private foundations and the National Institutes of Health. Jeff is deeply committed to social justice, racial equity, gender equality, and inclusion for all. He has a bachelor's degree from the University of Alabama and a master's degree from Boston College. Please join me in welcoming Jeff Olivet.
Thanks so much. You did a great job. That was wonderful. Chloe, I thought they invited me here because of my youthful vibe also. Gail, thank you for the introduction and all the great work that the Home Depot Foundation does here in Canada. It is great to be with you all today. I want to just express my gratitude to be among you all. Thank you for being here. Thanks for your hospitality, and thank you for everything you do. Bonjour et merci d'être là. Merci pour votre hospitalité. Merci pour tout ce que vous faites chaque jour. Je sais que le travail est difficile. No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to give the whole speech in French. That would be ridiculous, and because my French isn't that good. It is really wonderful to be here with you all. I'd like to just make a few acknowledgments at the outset. I got here in time yesterday. I came up from Washington, D.C., and got here in time for the reception and saw the beautiful land acknowledgement that took place right here on the stage. And sometimes words aren't enough to really acknowledge the truths of what happens. And so to see movement and music acknowledging this place, it was very powerful welcome to me. I've been thinking about what it means to acknowledge something or someone. And so I just looked it up. I did the dictionary thing. And one definition of an acknowledgement is an acceptance of the truth or existence of something. And it feels like we need a little more truth right now, and we need a little more acceptance of truth right now. But I would like to start just with the acknowledgement of the land on which we stand today. This is the ancestral and traditional land of the Mi'kmaq people. And you know, I was reading a little bit about the history of Nova Scotia and of Halifax. I've been all over Canada, but this is my first time here in Halifax, and I read that it's governed by the peace and friendship treaties between the Mi'kmaq people and the white settlers who came from Europe. And we could also use a little more peace and friendship in the world right now. We're in a time of anger, we're in a time of hatred. You can see it played out in Ukraine, you can see it played out in Israel and Gaza right now, and we certainly hold both of those parts of the world in our hearts today. But you can also see the anger and hatred here in Canada, and we certainly see it south of the border in the United States, where people are just at each other. People are entrenched in their point of view. They get caught up in their social media echo chamber and just talk to people who talk like they do. And we have to break out of that. And I believe it's folks like you here in this room who are in a prime position to do that. I'd like to also acknowledge Tim and the Canadian Alliance and the incredible work you do. Tim, you've told me several times over the years that you look to us for inspiration and ideas. We look to you for inspiration and ideas because you always do the stuff better than we tried to do it. So thank you for all the work that you do, and thank you for pulling this extraordinary gathering together. It's really fantastic to see so many of you in a room like this. I'd also like to acknowledge those among us today who are peers, who are people with lived experience of homelessness, either current or past, who are now part of the work to end homelessness for others. I think that takes a special kind of courage. It takes a special kind of strength. It takes a special kind and depth of compassion to have gone through the trauma of homelessness, to come out the other side, and then to say, I'm going to commit myself to this work of walking beside others during their darkest days. So thank you for being here, and thank you for what you do every day. I'd like to acknowledge a little bit about my background. You heard the sort of formal biography, but what's not in the formal biography is that my people came from France to Quebec many, many years ago, and then down through New York and Vermont, down to the southern part of the United States, where I grew up in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. So that's all in my heritage as well. I'm a former outreach worker. I've done street outreach work. I've been a case manager. I've run housing programs. I've done local coalition building and advocacy work. And now I have the incredible honor of working for the Biden-Harris administration as we tackle homelessness on a national scale. This work is hard. The work that you do every day is hard. And it got harder during the pandemic. Would you agree with that basic statement? And it's really hard coming out of the pandemic as well, because not only are you doing the life and death work of ending homelessness in your communities every day, you're also in your own recovery process from this incredible upheaval we've had, this incredible loss of life and of people we care about and of routines and of connections in the community. You're in recovery, and the people you're working with are in recovery. And I just wanted to take a minute to acknowledge how challenging that is and how much that can take out of you day to day. When I get on the airplane tomorrow to go back to Washington, they're going to make announcements. They make it in 2 languages on Air Canada. They're going to say, put on your own face mask before helping others so that you can breathe the oxygen that's there, so that you're in a place of strength to help others who might need help around you. We've got to do that in homelessness work also. We've got to remember to put on our own oxygen masks before helping others. Even though this is hard, we need you to keep doing what you're doing, because the crisis is as bad as it's been in a long time. And I was, I guess, not surprised, but I was still stunned to see the tents in front of City Hall here in Halifax. And I'm sure you're seeing tents in Winnipeg and in Vancouver and in Quebec City and in Edmonton and all over the country. We're seeing it in the United States too. We're seeing visible homelessness on a scale that we have really not seen in many, many decades. The crisis is urgent. The crisis is life and death. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the headwinds we're facing. It feels like we're in a moment where there really are some dark clouds right now around housing, around the mental health crisis that we're in as 2 nations coming out of the pandemic, and globally, the crisis that we're in around mental health. Even when there are dark clouds, though, there are bright spots. And there are some extraordinary bright spots here in Canada. I was talking to Ian last night, an old friend and colleague, just learning about some of what you all do. I was talking to Gail about some of the incredible youth work that's going on across Canada these days. So even though the numbers are rising, we've seen your data, we know that the problem is at crisis proportions right now, but we also see the extraordinary work that you're doing. We see the work that London is doing to sustain an end to veteran homelessness. We see the expansion of bridge housing in the Niagara region. We see the increased site-based supportive housing in Edmonton. We see the incredible work the Canadian Shelter Transformation Network is doing to make shelter more housing focused, because we know that shelter alone does not end homelessness. It keeps people alive so that we can get them back connected to housing and community. We see your work. We see the work that Stratford, Perth, and St. Mary's have done on chronic homelessness, and the incredible gains that you all have made in St. Thomas and Elgin in reducing chronic homelessness in your communities. Keep building on that work. It is extraordinary, and we're paying attention to what you're doing. In the United States, we got some dark clouds right now too. We're seeing more people become homeless for the first time than we've seen in many, many years, and that is young people, it's elderly people, it's families, it's veterans. We're just seeing this inflow into homelessness that is primarily driven by the housing market. It's primarily driven by the incredible lack of affordable housing. I don't know your numbers for this in Canada, but when I was born, because I'm not probably as young as Chloe is, when I was born, the United States had a surplus of affordable housing. In 1970, that was something like 300,000 units. We had more affordable housing units than people who needed them. Today, that number is a 7 million unit deficit. We have dug ourselves into a hole by not producing enough affordable housing along the way. And if you look at the data about where homelessness is increasing at the most dramatic rates, it is where the housing market is tightest. In the US, there are only 33 available affordable units for every 100 renters who need them. Imagine that. You probably have some numbers like that too. That is a nasty game of musical. Did you ever play musical chairs? I've got little kids who are now 23 and 16, but you go to a kid's birthday party and play musical chairs when there aren't enough chairs for everybody. And the kid who gets left out is maybe the one who's not quite as fast, maybe the one who's not quite as aggressive, fighting their way into a seat. What we see in homelessness is a deadly game of musical chairs where those who get left out are communities of color, LGBTQ people, particularly trans people who face all kinds of discrimination in housing, in employment, in just trying to live as a member of society. We see people with disabilities, not able to find a chair, not able to afford an affordable unit. It is a deadly game of musical chairs. And so in the long view, we've got to dig ourselves out of that deficit that we find ourselves in. In the US, we're also seeing unsheltered homelessness at incredibly high numbers. The tents you see here in Halifax and across the country, we're seeing that in Oakland and in Chicago and in Atlanta and in Miami as well. We're also seeing the convergence of immigration and homelessness in a very stark way right now, and it sounds like you all are beginning to see this too. We met with Deputy Minister Gillis this morning, and she was saying that a lot of asylum seekers are coming to Canada and ending up on the streets, ending up in shelters. We're seeing that same trend. And so we've got, in the US, a failure to provide for newly arrived immigrants, and we've got a failure to provide for people who are homeless here to begin with. And those issues are converging. They're no longer two distinct issues. It's becoming merged into one issue. We are also seeing the politicization of homelessness in a way that we have not seen in the 30 years I've been in this work. We're seeing homelessness used as a political football to say, look, you failed, that mayor's not doing well, that governor's not doing well. It's become a partisan issue in a way that I don't believe it needs to be. And I'm afraid you all might be on the verge of that here in Canada because, we've exported some stuff your way. I think jazz music is fantastic. Montreal does it well. Baseball, the Blue Jays had a solid year. Tailed off at the end, sorry about that. We've also exported some of the political vitriol that we're seeing in the US right now, and I want to implore you not to let that happen here. We're in a place in the US where we're losing the narrative on homelessness. It's becoming an issue of those people, it's becoming an issue of if only they would get mental health treatment or substance use treatment. It's become an issue of criticizing Housing First, saying, you've been doing Housing First for 20 years here and we still have homelessness, therefore Housing First is a failed policy, which is just bad analysis, but it's not about the analysis. It's about using homelessness as a political wedge, and I implore you to get out ahead of that because we're operating from behind on that in the US right now. In spite of all of this, we're seeing some incredible progress. We're seeing communities that are bucking the trend. I love all the research scholarships that were just presented, and congratulations to those of you who are doing such incredible research work. There's a term in research and policy called positive deviance. I love this concept. It sounds weird, right? Positive deviance. It's where places are doing better than all the bad trends. They're positively deviating from stuff that's not going so well. And what we're seeing in the US is some real bright spots where we're seeing places like Chattanooga, Tennessee reduce chronic homelessness by 30%. The city of Houston decreasing homelessness over a decade by 2/3. And we're seeing bright spots on homelessness prevention in places like San Jose, California. So there are some bright spots, even through the dark clouds. And I think our challenge for us in the US and for you here in Canada is to grab onto those bright spots and say, what is going on there? So not getting hung up on all the stuff that's not working, but getting hung up on the stuff that is working and saying, how do we do more of that? If something's working there, let's invest in it, let's scale it, let's pick out those real gems of positivity and of progress and scale them up and do more. We're also seeing in the US an increased focus over the last 5 or 6 years on addressing homelessness as a racial justice issue. And I know you're doing this here in Canada. I've looked at your numbers. I know that in places like Winnipeg, the percentage of people experiencing homelessness are 70% Indigenous. Nationwide here in Canada, 40% of people experiencing homelessness are Indigenous compared to something like 5% of the overall population. That's an outrage. And it's an outrage where I live too. 40% of the US homeless population is African American. Native people are represented at a rate of something like 5 to 1 compared to their general population numbers. And I would argue that this is no accident. When you come from a place that is built on genocide and land theft from Indigenous people, and in our case, on the back of chattel slavery to drive our economy for 246 years, it is no accident that today people of color are experiencing homelessness at higher rates than their white counterparts are. And I would also posit that you don't solve that by being blind to it. You solve it by acknowledging it, by seeing the truth in it, by having the courageous conversations you need to, and by looking to the leadership of Indigenous people and Black people to lead the way in solidarity with white folks, because we shouldn't expect Indigenous people and Black people to solve all this. It needs to be done together in solidarity and in a very focused, sustained way that shapes policy, not just rhetoric. It is not enough to train staff on cultural competence and say we've solved it. We got to come right at the problem of structural racism as a driver of homelessness, and we have to solve the systems that are failing people and stop blaming the people who are failed by those systems. I'd like to talk just for a minute about our national strategy. I know you all have a national strategy here in Canada, Reaching Home. I know you have a national housing strategy. We're looking to all of that to see how you can make progress in those areas. We put out a new federal strategy just about a year ago now called All In, and it's a federal strategic plan to prevent and end homelessness in the United States. And this plan is built around a number of pillars. And these are important because this shapes not only the federal administration policy, but how, in our case, states and localities play that out. And I hope you all are looking to your national plans and the connections to your locality, your municipalities, your provinces, to see how to embody that work, how to live out those values. Our plan is grounded in racial equity. That's the first pillar. We lead with equity. And it is about addressing the racial injustices of homelessness. It's also about access to housing and services for LGBTQ people and for people with disabilities. So we center that work of equity throughout all of our strategies. And we decided not to just list that as a value up front, to say we believe in equity, but to also build it as a pillar and to also build it as a strategy across all the other pillars. So equity is here, there, and everywhere in our plans and in our implementation of those plans. The second pillar is really around data and evidence, and I am a firm believer in data and evidence. We live in I think, sort of a post-truth society in some ways where people can't even agree on the facts. I think you have to keep bearing witness to the evidence of what is working. I have read with incredible interest the evolution of the at-home Chez Soi study over the last few years, and it's extraordinary, the evidence base that you've built. Hold on to that. Because I also want to warn you, as a cautionary tale, that the attacks we're seeing on Housing First in the United States can come your way if you don't watch out. And it can have a really undermining effect on our ability to sustain funding for Housing First and to keep doing what works. Now, we also know from your research and from Sam Simbaris' research in the US and others that Housing First does not mean housing only. I think what you all have done really well is to show that the wraparound supports that people need to stay connected with housing, to reconnect with community and family and friends and work and school and mental well-being and substance use recovery, the wraparound supports are every bit as important as the housing subsidy is. You got to do both and. You got to do both of those things really well, and I think you all are doing that. Keep it. Hold on to it. Ours is fraying around the edges, and I want to encourage you not to go down that path. We also have a very strong focus in the plan on collaboration at all levels, and this includes levels of government, but it also includes shoulder-to-shoulder collaboration with people who have experienced the tragedy of homelessness and who are now sitting in positions of leadership in our national response to homelessness, in local boards of directors, in state and national work, and in direct service work. A lot of you, I'm sure, are doing the incredible work of peer support. You've been homeless yourself, and now you're an outreach worker, you're a case manager, maybe you're an executive director of a program. We need more of that collaboration to be happening. We've got also, in our plan, we've got a sort of three-part solution to what it would take to end homelessness. And what I mean by that is it's not enough to solve homelessness for people who are homeless now. Sometimes people will ask me, do I think it's possible to end homelessness? And I think it's absolutely possible to end homelessness. And the main way I know that is that people are ending homelessness every day. People are exiting your shelter systems and your encampments and becoming homeless, or becoming housed and reconnected every single day. I also know it's possible to end homelessness because we've done it over and over and over the 30 years that I've been in this work. I mean, there's certainly a small number of people who are homeless for a long period of time. We sometimes talk about that as chronic homelessness. But for the most part, folks exit homelessness. It's a temporary housing situation. And sometimes that's short, sometimes it's long. But homelessness is not a type of person. It is a housing situation. If we can solve the housing situation, we can solve homelessness. What we have not done well in the US, and I would humbly say maybe you haven't done this as well in Canada either, is we've not turned off the faucets that prevent people from becoming homeless in the first place. So what we see is a lot of inflow. We see a lot of people who have served their time in jail and prison, who end up on the streets. We've seen a lot of people who have served their time in the military and end up homeless. We see a lot of young people who age out of the foster care system, child welfare, as we call it in the US. Sometimes it works counter to child welfare in the US. We see a lot of young people become homeless in their first 2 years after aging out of care. We've got to turn off those particular faucets, because if we can turn off the faucet from the criminal legal system into homelessness and from foster care into homelessness, we are also doing the work of racial equity. Because in the US, 9 out of 10 of young people who exit foster care and end up in homelessness are youth of color, and more than 50% identify as LGBTQ. So the work of prevention is the work of racial justice. And we've got to do all of that, we've got to fund it better, and we've got to figure out the collaborations across systems that make that work. So prevention is the first part of that three-part idea. The second is the crisis response. And this is the work of how do you get those folks who are living in tents here in November, and I know it's going to be a lot colder in February, how do we get those folks into housing as quickly as possible? And so when I hear about shelters doing more housing-focused sheltering, when I hear about housing-focused outreach, this is what we need to be doing. We need to be creating rapid pipelines from the experience of unsheltered homelessness or sheltered homelessness straight into permanent housing with all of the wraparound supports we need. In the US, we're taking on unsheltered homelessness in really powerful ways. My colleague Beverly Ebersold, who's here, leads an initiative called the All Inside Project, which is focused on unsheltered homelessness in 7 jurisdictions around the United States, really trying to support cities and states in addressing unsheltered homelessness with the urgency that's needed. And then the third part of this is scaling up the housing and services that we know are the permanent solutions to homelessness. So we do the upstream work of prevention, we do the crisis response work with the life and death urgency that it requires, and we scale up and sustain the housing and wraparound supports that end homelessness once and for all. We need to be working equally in all 3 of those areas, because if all we're doing is the emergency stuff, it would be like you set up a healthcare system that's only emergency rooms. Then you say to the emergency room, why is there still obesity? Why haven't you solved depression yet? right? You need a health system that does prevention, that does really good crisis care, and that does ongoing maintenance for folks. And we think about that same public health analogy in homelessness as well. One lesson that we're learning in the States these days is that we cannot fall into the trap of either or thinking. And this is where things can get really politicized. Homelessness is either a mental health issue or it's a housing issue. Homelessness, for a response, we either just need to scale up housing and let the mainstream do its work, or we need to focus on getting people into forced residential treatment is another dangerous trend we're seeing in the US right now. It is both and. We need to be able to focus on housing and social supports. We need to be able to focus on housing and mental health care and substance abuse treatment. We need to do the crisis work and the upstream prevention work. It is both and thinking. And when you hear people at a city council meeting or at a provincial parliament, I don't know what you call that level, or national parliament, or at the provincial level, when you hear people falling into that either or thinking, challenge them on it, because it is both and thinking that is going to get us out of homelessness. Speaking of that, I know I talked earlier about how challenging this work can be, and you all know this. It is, for people who are homeless, these are the darkest days of their lives. They weren't always homeless. They're not hopefully always going to be homeless going forward, but people are in really, really dark times. There's a lot of pain. There's a lot of violence. There's a lot of sexual assault and physical abuse. There's a lot of dehumanization, where people walk by and don't see, don't look someone in the eye, don't treat them as a human being. And so you're walking beside people during the painful times, and at the same time, there is incredible joy in our work. When you're with somebody the first day they get the key to their new apartment, when you're with somebody who a year ago was missing their teeth from a fight on the street or from being attacked, and now they've gotten good health care and they've got dentures and they're smiling again for the first time in years. These are incredible moments of joy. And so we got to be big enough to hold that pain and that joy. And I believe that it's in the tension between pain and joy that we find meaning. I also hope that you'll continue to celebrate your successes, even when times are hard, because there are successes. There's good work happening. And you're doing good work in spite of what's stacked against you, in spite of the challenges that you're seeing. Take a minute and celebrate what's going well, and then let's put our shoulders back to it and get back to work. I'd like to close just talking about the importance of hope. And hope is not one of those things like, hey, I hope I don't have any delays with my flight tomorrow. I hope it's a nice weekend. It's not that. Hope is it's a choice. It's a choice we make, and it's a choice we make not just once, but day after day after day. In that way, hope becomes a practice. It's not just something you sort of like, I hope we achieve our national goals in ending homelessness. It becomes a practice that we cultivate, where we begin transforming the belief that change is possible, the belief that it's possible to solve homelessness, the belief that if we can stay in this together for long enough, we will see a day where there's no homelessness in Canada and no homelessness in the US. We translate that hope into policy change. We translate that hope into funding. We translate that hope into the energy that it takes to do this work. So not only is hope a choice and a practice, hope is imperative. It is an essential component of the work of ending homelessness. When you choose despair over hope, we've lost. When you continue to choose hope over despair, over frustration, over funding limitations, over all the things that are stacked against us, when you continue to choose hope, then an end to homelessness is possible. We come at this work with our eyes wide open. We come at this work with our hearts wide open, because it takes love. It takes love for one another in the comradeship of doing this important work. It takes love for the people that you see come through your shelters and your housing programs and your health centers every day. So come at it with your heart open, but keep coming at it. The fact that there are so many of you sitting in this room right now, connected to the work, connected to one another, gives me incredible hope to know that there's this kind of energy, this kind of focus north of the border. I gotta say that I'll take that back through customs with me tomorrow. And we're gonna keep watching, and we're in this together. Homelessness is not a local problem, it's not even a national problem, it is a global crisis. And you are part of the work, you are part of an army of people in Canada and in the US and all over this world that are in the good and critical and important fight to end homelessness. Thank you for everything you do every day. Thank you for the hope that you inspire in the people you serve and the hope you inspire in me. Keep it up. Look forward to crossing paths again. Thank you.
Thank you so much for those timely and thoughtful remarks, Jeff. It can be so hard to strike that balance between acknowledging how dire things are while carving out intentional space for the bright spots, as you call them. So thank you so much for taking the time to illuminate those. It's such a privilege to be able to learn and share across contexts, and there are, I think, more similarities in some cases than we would maybe like, and I would just add, especially being here in Halifax and with the vibrant culture of African Nova Scotians, naming the role of anti-Black racism in Canada's history of slavery in producing homelessness here as well, which is not something that we talk about always in the same way as we do in the States. So thank you so much for those remarks. Thank you for closing on hope. Thank you for everything you're doing and for giving us a small glimpse into some of maybe the best few words of French I've ever heard from an American. So that was, let's invite everyone to just thank Jeff one more time. I've got a couple of quick announcements, just some logistics before we wrap up. Just as a reminder, there is an artisan market on the southeast side of Argyle level near the escalators from 3 to 5 p.m. In the print program, RTH5, Preventing Evictions, Rent Banks, Activism, and Access to Justice, is incorrectly listed as being from 1:30 to 3 p.m. It is actually 3:30 to 5 p.m. in Argyle 3. It is listed in the correct section, but there was a typo on the time. And there are a couple of exciting new meetings and gatherings that have come together during the conference. There is a new International Indigenous Leadership Dialogue meeting in room 505 today at 1:30 p.m., where Indigenous leaders from across Turtle Island and the world will be gathering to discuss a potential global Indigenous homelessness summit. So that is today in room 505 at 1:30 p.m. for those interested. And there will also be a Black Caucus meeting in room 505 at 3 p.m. for Black participants to gather, connect, and talk about their work and Black homelessness and what could be done to address that. And in addition to this, the Faith Communities for Homefulness is a new allied network of the Canadian Alliance to End Homelessness, and everybody is welcome to come to an introductory meeting at 5 p.m. today in room 603 to learn more about the goals of this network and their goals of inspiring, engaging, and sharing good practices among faith communities. So that is the Faith Communities for Homefulness today at 5 p.m. in room 603. International Indigenous Leadership Dialogue in 505 at 1:30, and Black Caucus in room 505 at 3 p.m. And with that, we will wrap up, and I'd invite everyone to proceed to the concurrent sessions, which will start in 15 minutes. So thank you so much, everybody, and see you soon.